The bone-chilling wind howled across the Sierra Nevada mountains as Bethany Crawford urged her exhausted horses forward, cursing the decision to leave the wagon train behind. September 1853 was proving to be colder than anyone had warned when she'd set out from Boston 6 months earlier, determined to claim her inheritance, a small but promising gold mine near Placerville, California. "Just a little farther," she whispered to the horses, her gloved hands tight on the reins. The narrow mountain pass stretched before her, treacherous with loose rock and patches of early snow. Bethany had been traveling alone for 3 days since separating from the main wagon train, convinced she could make better time on her own. Now, with the wind rising and daylight fading, doubt crept into her mind like the cold seeping through her woolen coat. At 22, Bethany had faced her share of hardships orphaned at 16, working as a seamstress to survive, then learning of her uncle's death and the surprising bequest that promised a new beginning. The journey west had depleted most of her savings, but the promise of gold and independence drove her forward despite the dangers. As the wagon rounded a sharp bend, the lead horse spooked at something unseen, rearing suddenly. Bethany pulled hard on the reins, but the wagon's momentum carried it forward, wheels sliding on loose gravel. Her heart hammered as she felt the wagon tip precariously toward the edge of the path, where a steep drop awaited. "Whoa!" A deep voice cut through the chaos as a mounted figure appeared on the path ahead. The stranger dismounted in one fluid motion, rushing toward her panicking team. His movements were sure and swift as he grabbed the bridle of the lead horse, speaking in low, commanding tones that somehow calmed the frightened animals. Too late, Bethany realized the wagon had slid too far. With a sickening lurch, the right wheels left the path, tilting the entire wagon. She felt herself falling, tumbling from her seat as the wagon tipped further. A splintering crack pierced the air as the wagon crashed onto its side, sliding several feet down the incline before coming to rest against a boulder. Pain exploded through Bethany's right leg as the heavy wooden wheel came down upon it during the tumble. Her scream echoed across the mountains, carried away by the merciless wind. Through a haze of agony, she saw the stranger sliding down the slope toward her, his face a mask of concern. The last thing she remembered before darkness claimed her was a pair of intense green eyes and a voice saying, "Hold on, miss. I've got you." When Bethany awoke, the world was bathed in the orange glow of firelight. She lay wrapped in blankets beside a small campfire, the night sky stretching vast and star-filled above. The pain in her leg returned with consciousness, drawing a gasp from her lips. "Easy now," came that same deep voice. "Try not to move." She turned to see a man kneeling beside her, his features sharp in the firelight. He appeared to be in his late 20s, with a strong jaw shadowed by a few days' worth of stubble. His dark hair fell in untamed waves to his collar, and those green eyes she remembered studied her with genuine concern. "My wagon," she managed through parched lips. "Wrecked beyond repair, I'm afraid," he said, offering her a canteen. "Your horses are fine, though. I've got them tethered nearby." Bethany took a grateful sip of water. "Who are you?" "Garrett Sullivan," he replied, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. "Most folks call me Sully." "Bethany Crawford." She tried to shift position and cried out as pain lanced through her leg. "Don't move," Sully said firmly. "That wheel did a number on your leg. It's badly broken, maybe worse." Fear gripped her heart. "How bad?" He hesitated, then spoke with careful honesty. "Bad enough that you need a real doctor, and soon. We're 3 days hard ride from Placerville, nearest town with a proper doctor. 3 days." Panic edged into her voice. "But my leg, I know." His expression was grim but determined. "I've splinted it as best I can, but infection's the real danger. We need to get you to that doctor." "We can't possibly." "We can and we will," Sully interrupted. "First light, we're heading out." "I'll carry you if I have to." Bethany stared at him, this stranger who spoke with such conviction. "Why would you do that for someone you don't even know?" Something flickered in his eyes, a shadow of old pain, quickly masked. "Out here, we look after each other. That's just the way it is." He turned away to tend the fire. "Get some rest. Dawn comes early in these mountains." Despite the pain and fear, Bethany felt a strange sense of security in this man's presence. As she drifted back to sleep, she wondered what twist of fate had placed Garrett Sullivan on that mountain path just when she needed him most. Morning brought clarity, and with it, greater pain. Sully had fashioned a splint for her leg using pieces of her wrecked wagon, but every small movement sent waves of agony through her body. The break was just below her knee, the flesh already purple and swollen beyond recognition. "I've salvaged what I could from your wagon," Sully told her as he prepared a breakfast of coffee and hardtack. "Most of your provisions, some clothing. Your strongbox too figured that might be important." Bethany nodded gratefully. The small iron box contained her uncle's mine deed and what remained of her money, everything she had in the world. "Thank you," she said, accepting the tin cup of coffee he offered. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along." Sully shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. "What brings a woman alone into these mountains? It's no place for solitary travelers, male or female." She explained about her uncle's mine near Placerville, the wagon train she'd left behind. "Impatient, were you?" There was no judgment in his voice, only understanding. "Foolish," she admitted. "I thought I could handle myself. I've been independent since I was 16. Sully nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "Independence is fine, but these mountains don't care how capable you are. They've killed better prepared folks than either of us." He stood, brushing crumbs from his buckskin-clad legs. "Time to move out. The sooner we get you to Placerville, the better your chances." "How will we travel? I can't ride." "I've rigged a travois for you behind my horse. It won't be comfortable, but it's the best option." The travois proved to be a simple but effective construction. Two of her wagon's sideboards lashed to form poles, with blankets stretched between them, attached to Sully's horse. Her own team would follow, carrying their supplies. When it came time to move her, Bethany bit her lip until it bled, determined not to scream as Sully carefully lifted her. Despite his gentleness, the pain was excruciating. She felt the solid strength of his arms, the steady beat of his heart against her side as he cradled her. "I'm sorry," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear as he settled her onto the travois. "I know it hurts something fierce." Tears streamed down her face, but she managed a tight nod. "I can bear it." His green eyes held respect as he adjusted the blankets around her. "Yes, madam, I believe you can." The first day's journey was a torment Bethany could never have imagined. Every step of Sully's horse transmitted jolts to her broken leg, despite his efforts to choose the smoothest path. By midday, fever had set in, and her world narrowed to a tunnel of pain and the sound of Sully's voice, sometimes talking to her, sometimes singing softly old trail songs and ballads that seemed to float through the haze of her suffering. When they stopped to rest, he tended her with unexpected gentleness, bathing her feverish face with cool water from a stream, coaxing her to drink broth he prepared from his meager supplies. In her more lucid moments, she wondered about this man, a cowboy by his dress and manner, but with educated speech and a knowledge of medicine that suggested a different background. "Were you a doctor once?" she asked as he changed the dressing on her leg, his touch professional but tender. A sad smile crossed his face. No, but I wanted to be. Life had other plans. What happened? His hands paused in their work. War happened. I was studying medicine back east when the Mexican War broke out. Felt it was my duty to enlist. By the time it ended, I'd seen enough blood and death to last several lifetimes. His voice had grown distant. Couldn't go back to medicine after that. Headed west instead, been working cattle drives and odd jobs ever since. Bethany reached out, touching his arm lightly. I'm sorry. He shook his head, finishing with her bandage. Don't be. Out here I found a kind of peace. He looked up at the towering pines and endless sky. Most days anyway. That night, as her fever worsened, Sully kept a constant vigil. Through her delirium, Bethany was aware of him bathing her face and neck with cool cloths, of his strong hands supporting her when she needed to drink, of his voice, always his voice, anchoring her to the world. Stay with me, Bethany, he urged when her fever peaked near dawn. You're stronger than this. Fight. She wanted to tell him she was trying, but words were beyond her grasp. Instead, she focused on his face, using it as a beacon to guide her through the burning haze of infection. By the second day, Bethany's fever had broken, but a different danger presented itself. The mountain trail narrowed dangerously as they descended, in some places barely wide enough for Sully's horse with the travois. Sheer cliff faces rose on one side while deadly drops yawned on the other. Sully led his horse on foot, speaking constantly to the animal in low, reassuring tones. Easy, Thunder. Steady now. That's right, one step at a time. Despite her pain, Bethany couldn't help admiring the bond between man and horse. The big bay gelding clearly trusted Sully implicitly, placing each hoof with careful precision on the treacherous path. He's a magnificent animal, she commented during a brief rest. Sully patted the horse's sweaty neck with obvious affection. Best partner a man could ask for. Been together 5 years now, through some tight spots. He offered Thunder a handful of oats from his pocket. He's got more sense than most humans I've known. How did you come by him? A fond smile touched Sully's lips. Won him in a poker game in Santa Fe. Owner was a cruel fool who didn't deserve such a horse. Best hand I ever played. He glanced back at Bethany. Though finding you on this trail might be the luckiest draw yet. The simple statement, delivered without artifice, brought a warmth to Bethany's cheeks that had nothing to do with fever. She looked away, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance and the helpless state he'd found her in. I must look a fright, she murmured, attempting to smooth her tangled hair with one hand. Sully studied her for a long moment, his green eyes surprisingly gentle. You look like the bravest woman I've ever met. He turned back to check the travois straps, but not before Bethany caught the slight redness coloring his tanned face. As they continued their slow, painful journey, Bethany learned more about her rescuer. He'd been born in Pennsylvania to educated parents who died of typhoid when he was 18, leaving him to make his own way. After the war, he drifted west, working cattle drives from Texas to Montana, occasionally hiring on as a scout or guide for wagon trains. Is that what brings you to these mountains, guiding settlers? She asked as they made camp on the second night. Sully shook his head, stirring the small cooking fire. Not this time. I'm heading to a place called Coloma, about 20 miles from Placerville. Got word from an old Army friend who struck gold there. Figured I'd try my luck. Bethany couldn't hide her surprise. Coloma, that's where my uncle's claim is located. Is that so? Sully raised an eyebrow, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Seems our paths were destined to cross one way or another, Miss Crawford. Bethany, she corrected him. I think we're well past formalities at this point, Mr. Sullivan. Sully, he countered, handing her a plate of beans and salt pork. Only my mother ever called me Mr. Sullivan, and that was when I was in considerable trouble." They shared a smile, and for a moment, Bethany almost forgot the pain in her leg and the perilous situation they faced. There was something comforting about Sully's presence, a steadiness she'd rarely encountered in her life. The night grew cold quickly, as it often did in the mountains, and Sully built up the fire before arranging their bedrolls. Without comment, he placed his own beside hers, close enough that she could benefit from his body heat but with a respectful distance maintained. "Sleep if you can," he advised, checking her splint one last time. "Tomorrow's the hardest stretch yet, but by nightfall we should be close enough to Placerville to reach it by the following afternoon." Bethany nodded, exhaustion pulling at her. As she drifted toward sleep, she felt Sully drape an extra blanket over her. The simple gesture of care nearly brought tears to her eyes. "Sully," she murmured, already half asleep. "Yes, thank you for everything." In the firelight his expression softened. "Get some rest, Bethany, I'll keep watch." And she knew without doubt that he would, that this man she'd known for barely 2 days would guard her with his life if necessary. It was a strange and wonderful feeling for someone who had been alone for so long. Dawn of the third day brought new challenges. The path grew steeper as they descended, requiring Sully to practically carry the travois in places to prevent it from sliding dangerously. By midday, his shirt was soaked with sweat, his face etched with lines of fatigue, but he never complained. "We need to rest," Bethany insisted when she saw him stumble slightly. "You can't keep this pace." "I'm fine," he insisted, but the strain in his voice betrayed him. "Please, Sully, you won't help me by collapsing yourself." He relented, finding a small clearing where a spring bubbled from the mountainside. While the horses drank gratefully, he knelt beside Bethany, checking her leg. "The swelling's down a bit," he noted with relief. "How's the pain?" "Manageable," she lied, not wanting to add to his burden. His knowing look told her he wasn't fooled. "I have a little laudanum left. It might help for the roughest part ahead." Bethany shook her head. "Save it. I'd rather stay alert." Respect flickered in his eyes. "As you wish." They shared a simple meal of jerky and hardtack, washing it down with the cold, clear spring water. As Sully prepared to continue their journey, Bethany studied him openly, taking in details she hadn't noticed before: a thin scar that traced his jawline, the way one corner of his mouth lifted slightly higher than the other when he smiled, the gentleness of his work-hardened hands. "Why did you really stop to help me?" she asked suddenly. Most men would have considered a lone woman with a broken leg too much trouble. Sully paused in checking Thunder's saddle girth. For a long moment he was silent, and Bethany thought he might not answer. 8 years ago, he finally said, his voice low, "my younger sister tried to make this same journey. She was heading to meet her fiancé in Sacramento." His hand stilled on the leather strap. "Her wagon train was caught in an early blizzard in these mountains. When the rescue party found them months later, they'd all perished." He turned to face Bethany, his eyes holding old grief. "I've always wondered if someone had come along at the right moment, might she have been saved? I couldn't ride past you, knowing I might live with that question again." Impulsively, Bethany reached for his hand. "I'm so sorry about your sister." His fingers tightened briefly around hers. "Her name was Elizabeth. She would have been about your age now." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken emotion. Then Sully gently withdrew his hand, returning to his task. "We should move on," he said, his voice rough. "Still a lot of ground to cover before dark." As promised, the afternoon's travel proved the most difficult yet. The trail narrowed to a ledge in places, forcing Sully to carry Bethany in his arms while leading Thunder behind them. Despite his evident exhaustion, he never faltered, his arms steady and sure around her. Being held against his chest, Hearing the strong beat of his heart, Bethany experienced conflicting emotions. Gratitude, certainly, but also a growing awareness of him as a man, his strength, his kindness, the clean scent of his skin beneath the dust of travel. It was disconcerting to feel such things when she was at her most vulnerable, yet she couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach when his eyes met hers. By sunset, they had reached more level ground, and Sully was able to use the travois again. In the distance, they could see the first signs of civilization, cleared land and the smoke from distant chimneys. "We'll camp here tonight," Sully decided, finding a sheltered spot near a small stream. "Should reach Placerville by mid-afternoon tomorrow if all goes well." As he tended the horses and prepared their camp with practiced efficiency, Bethany sensed a subtle change in his demeanor, a withdrawal she couldn't quite understand. He was still attentive to her needs, still gentle when checking her injury, but a guardedness had entered his manner. "Is something wrong?" she finally asked as they sat beside the fire, the night closing around them. Sully poked at the flames with a stick, his expression distant. "Just thinking about tomorrow. Aren't you glad we're nearly there? You've done the impossible, getting me this far." He nodded, but the gesture lacked conviction. "Of course. Then what troubles you?" He was silent so long that Bethany thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. "Tomorrow you'll be in Placerville, under a doctor's care. You'll have your uncle's claim to see to. Your new life begins." He tossed the stick into the fire. "And I'll be heading on to Coloma as planned." Understanding dawned. "You think we'll say goodbye and never see each other again?" His green eyes reflected the firelight as they finally met hers. "Isn't that how these things usually go? Paths cross in times of trouble, then diverge once the trouble's past." Bethany considered his words. Before her accident, she had been fiercely focused on her independence, on building a life that belonged solely to her. Now, the thought of continuing alone, of never seeing Sully again after all they'd shared, left a hollow feeling in her chest. "It doesn't have to be that way," she said softly. Something flickered in his eyes, hope perhaps, quickly controlled. "What are you saying, Bethany?" She chose her words carefully. "I'm saying that Coloma and Placerville are hardly worlds apart, that I owe you my life and would like the chance to repay that debt somehow, that perhaps—" She faltered, suddenly unsure of herself. "Perhaps," he prompted gently. "Perhaps what began on a mountain trail needn't end in town." Her cheeks warmed at her own boldness. Sully studied her face intently, as if searching for something. "You've been through a terrible ordeal. Sometimes gratitude can feel like something else." "I wouldn't want you to. I know my own mind, Garrett Sullivan," she interrupted, using his full name for the first time. "Gratitude and whatever else I might feel are not the same thing." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his rugged features. "No, madam, I reckon they're not." He reached across the space between them, his calloused hand gently covering hers. "I'd like very much to see you again once you're settled and healing." The simple touch sent warmth spiraling through Bethany, more effective than any medicine for her pain. "I'd like that too." They sat in companionable silence for a time, the fire crackling between them, their hands still joined. Eventually, Sully reluctantly pulled away to prepare their bedrolls for the night. "Rest well," he told her as he settled nearby. "Tomorrow brings better things." For the first time since her accident, Bethany fell asleep with hope rather than fear in her heart. Morning brought a fine, misty rain that soon soaked through their clothing. Sully fashioned a shelter over the travois, using canvas salvaged from Bethany's wagon, but the going was slow on the increasingly muddy trail. By noon, they were both thoroughly chilled and uncomfortable. "There," Sully pointed to a cluster of buildings that had appeared around a bend in the trail. "Placerville." The sight of the bustling mining town brought tears of relief to Bethany's eyes. What had seemed an impossible journey 3 days ago was actually coming to an end, thanks to the extraordinary man beside her. As they approached the outskirts of town, Sully's expression grew troubled. He rained thunder to a halt, scanning the street ahead. "What is it?" Bethany asked. "Something's not right." His eyes narrowed as he studied the commotion near the center of town. "Looks like trouble. Wait here." Before Bethany could protest, he had dismounted and moved ahead on foot, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. She watched anxiously as he approached a man leading a heavily laden mule, spoke briefly, then returned, his face grim. "Bad news. There's been an outbreak of cholera. Half the town's sick, including the doctor." He ran a hand through his damp hair. "They've converted the church to a makeshift hospital, but they're overwhelmed." Fear clutched at Bethany's heart. "What do we do now?" Sully considered for a moment, his jaw set with determination. "We head for Coloma. It's smaller than Placerville, but my friend wrote that they have a decent doctor there. It's another day's journey, but it's our best hope," Bethany finished for him. Swallowing her disappointment and fear, he nodded, remounting thunder. "Can you hold out that long?" Despite the pain and exhaustion, Bethany managed a brave smile. "With you beside me, I believe I can do anything." Something shifted in Sully's expression, a softening, a moment of vulnerable emotion quickly masked by practical concern. "We'll skirt around Placerville to avoid exposure to the sickness. It'll add some time, but it's safer." The detour took them along the American River, swollen with autumn rains. By late afternoon, the weather had worsened, the drizzle turning to a steady downpour that made travel increasingly dangerous. When Thunder nearly lost his footing on the slick riverbank, Sully made the decision to seek shelter for the night. "There's an abandoned trapper's cabin up ahead if I remember right," he told Bethany, raising his voice against the drumming rain. "Not much, but it'll be dry." The cabin proved to be little more than a single room with a stone fireplace and a sagging wooden bunk, but to Bethany, it looked like paradise. The roof leaked in only a few places, and the chimney was miraculously intact. While Sully stabled the horses in the tiny lean-to attached to the cabin, Bethany took stock of their situation. Her leg throbbed mercilessly, and she was soaked to the skin despite the canvas covering. Fever threatened again, lurking at the edges of her consciousness. Another day's travel in these conditions might prove too much, even with Sully's unwavering support. When he returned, carrying their meager supplies and an armload of relatively dry firewood from the lean-to, Bethany had made a decision. "Sully," she said as he knelt to build a fire, "I need to ask something of you." He looked up, water dripping from his hair. "Anything." "If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen," he interrupted firmly. "Please let me finish." She took a steadying breath. "If something happens, I want you to have my uncle's claim. The deed is in my strongbox. You'd make better use of it than some stranger who might otherwise acquire it." Sully abandoned the firewood, moving to kneel beside her makeshift bed. "Bethany, listen to me. You're going to be fine. We'll reach Coloma tomorrow. The doctor will set your leg properly, and in a few months, you'll be supervising your own mine." She shook her head, needing him to understand. "I'm not giving up. I'm being practical the way I've had to be all my life. Promise me you'll take the claim if the worst happens." His green eyes held hers, intense with emotion. "I promise, but only because it seems to bring you peace. I have no intention of collecting on that promise." Satisfied, Bethany relaxed slightly. "Thank you." Sully returned to building the fire, and soon the small cabin was filled with welcome warmth and light. He helped Bethany remove her sodden outer clothing, wrapping her in dry blankets before tending to her leg. The splint had held remarkably well, but the skin around it was hot and red. "The wound's infected," he said grimly. "I was afraid of this." From his saddlebag, he produced a small bottle of whiskey and a clean cloth. "This will hurt," he warned. Bethany gritted her teeth as he carefully cleaned the wound, the whiskey burning like fire on her raw flesh. Tears streamed down her face, but she made no sound beyond a sharp intake of breath. "You're the strongest person I've ever known," Sully murmured as he rewrapped her leg. "Most men would be howling by now." "Screaming wouldn't help," she managed through clenched teeth. "No, but it might be more honest." His hand lingered on her ankle, a gentle touch meant to comfort. "You don't always have to be so brave, Bethany." Something in his words, the permission to be vulnerable, perhaps broke through her careful control. A sob escaped her lips, then another, until she was weeping openly, releasing all the fear and pain she'd been holding back for days. Without hesitation, Sully gathered her into his arms, cradling her against his chest while she cried. He said nothing, simply offering the shelter of his embrace until the storm of emotion passed. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered against his shirt. "Don't be." His voice rumbled beneath her ear. "Sometimes tears are the only honest response to pain." Bethany looked up to find his face inches from hers, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Something passed between them in that moment, an awareness, a connection deeper than words. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Sully lowered his head until his lips met hers in a kiss, so gentle it was barely a touch. When she didn't withdraw, he deepened the kiss, one hand coming up to cradle her face with exquisite tenderness. When they finally parted, Bethany felt breathless, her heart racing with emotions she couldn't quite name. Sully's eyes searched hers, uncertain. "I shouldn't have," she pressed her fingers to his lips, stopping his apology. "Yes, you should have. I've been wondering when you would." A smile spread across his face, transforming it. "Have you now? Since yesterday at least," she admitted, feeling a blush warm her cheeks. He laughed softly, the sound rich and genuine. "And here I thought I was being so careful not to show my feelings. Not careful enough, thankfully." She touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "I've never met anyone like you, Sully. Nor I you." His expression grew serious. "But Bethany, your condition, the circumstances make this all the more precious," she finished for him. "I don't know what tomorrow brings, Sully. But tonight, I'm grateful to be here with you, alive and safe because of you." He kissed her again, and this time there was nothing tentative about it. In his arms, Bethany forgot her pain, forgot everything except the warmth of his embrace and the certainty that whatever happened next, her life had changed irrevocably the moment Garrett Sullivan had appeared on that mountain trail. Later, as they shared their meager supper beside the fire, the storm raging outside only emphasized the coziness within. Sully had arranged their bedrolls side by side, close enough for comfort, but still maintaining a respectful distance. Despite the hunger in his kisses, he was clearly determined to protect Bethany's honor as diligently as he had protected her life. "Tell me about your uncle's mine," he said as they finished the last of their coffee. "What made him leave it to you?" Bethany smiled at the memory of her eccentric uncle. "He was my mother's brother, unconventional, adventurous, always searching for the next big opportunity. He came west with the first wave of the gold rush in '49, wrote to us about his successes and failures." Her expression softened. "When my parents died, he sent money regularly to help me, though we never met in person. His last letter said he'd finally struck a promising vein but was feeling his age. He wanted me to come west, said I had the Crawford spirit and deserved a chance at real independence." Sounds like a good man. "I think he was. The lawyer who contacted me after his death said he'd spoken of me often, proud of how I'd managed on my own in Boston. She gazed into the fire. "I hope I can make his faith in me worthwhile." "You will," Sully said with conviction. "If anyone can make a success of a mining claim, it's you, Bethany Crawford." His confidence warmed her more than the fire. "And what of your plans, Sully? Will you stay in Coloma if your friend's strike proves profitable?" He considered the question, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "I haven't thought beyond finding a stake of my own. I've been drifting so long, it's hard to imagine settling anywhere." His eyes met hers. "Though lately, I've been thinking it might be time to put down some roots." The implication hung between them, unspoken but clear. Bethany felt her heart quicken at the possibility of a shared future with this man who had so quickly become essential to her. "Roots are good," she said softly. "Especially when planted in rich soil." Sully's smile held promise. "The richest." They talked long into the night, sharing stories of their pasts, dreams for their futures, discovering the many unexpected ways their different lives had prepared them to understand each other. When exhaustion finally claimed them, they fell asleep with their hands entwined between their separate bedrolls, connected even in slumber. Bethany woke before dawn to find Sully already up, checking her leg with careful hands. "How bad is it?" she asked, reading concern in his expression. "The infection's spreading." He didn't sugarcoat the truth. "We need to reach Coloma today." Outside, the storm had passed, leaving a world washed clean and bright. Sully packed their belongings with swift efficiency, then carried Bethany to the travois, now padded with extra blankets. "It's going to be rough going," he warned as he secured her. "But I'll get you there, I swear it." Bethany believed him with every fiber of her being. "I know you will." The journey that day tested them both to their limits. The trail followed the river, crossing it twice on precarious log bridges that had Sully carrying Bethany in his arms while leading Thunder with extreme caution. By midday, her fever had returned with a vengeance, and she drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of Sully's voice urging her to hold on, of his hands periodically checking her forehead, of the relentless forward motion that jarred her injured leg with every step. Through her delirium, she heard him talking constantly, sometimes to her, sometimes to Thunder, sometimes seemingly to himself or to the memory of his sister. "Not losing another one," she heard him mutter once. "Not this time, not her." The sun was low in the western sky when Bethany felt the travois stop. Through fever-glazed eyes, she saw buildings, heard voices calling out. Sully's face appeared above her, etched with exhaustion and worry. "We made it, Bethany. We're in Coloma. The doctor's coming. Just hold on a little longer." She tried to smile, to tell him how proud she was of him, but darkness was closing in again. The last thing she remembered was being lifted by strong arms and carried toward a doorway where lamplight spilled onto a wooden porch. Bethany's return to consciousness came in stages. First, awareness of being in a real bed, of clean sheets and a soft pillow. Then, recognition that the pain in her leg, while still present, had changed character, becoming sharp and localized rather than the burning spread of infection. Finally, the sensation of a warm hand holding hers, a thumb gently stroking her palm. She opened her eyes to find Sully seated beside her bed, his face haggard with fatigue but his eyes brightening as he met her gaze. "Welcome back," he said softly. Bethany licked dry lips. "How long?" 3 days. He helped her take a sip of water from a glass on the bedside table. "The doctor had to rebrake and set your leg properly. The infection was bad. He wasn't sure you'd make it through that first night." She squeezed his hand weakly. "But I did." "You did." His voice roughened with emotion. "Because you're the strongest, most stubborn woman in the territory." A smile tugged at her lips. "I had something to live for." Before Sully could respond, the door opened to admit a gray-haired man with spectacles and a kindly face. "Ah, our patient is awake at last," he said, approaching the bed. "I'm Dr. Elliot. You've given us all quite a scare, Miss Crawford." "She's a fighter," Sully said, his pride evident. "Indeed she is." The doctor checked her pulse, then her temperature. "The fever's broken, thank God. Now we just need to keep that leg immobile and give it time to heal." "How long?" Bethany asked, dreading the answer. Dr. Elliott's expression was sympathetic but honest. 6 to 8 weeks before you can put any weight on it. Another month or 2 after that with crutches. I won't lie to you, Miss Crawford, it was a severe break, complicated by the delay in proper treatment. You were fortunate Mr. Sullivan got you here when he did." "I know," she said, looking at Sully with undisguised affection. The doctor glanced between them, a knowing smile touching his lips. "Well, I'll leave you two alone. Miss Crawford needs rest, Mr. Sullivan. See that she gets it." After he departed, Sully moved to sit carefully on the edge of Bethany's bed. "He's right, you should sleep." "I've been sleeping for 3 days," she protested weakly. "Tell me what's happened." "Where are we? How have you been?" "We're at my friend Jacob Miller's house. He's the one who wrote to me about the gold strike. His wife Sarah has been caring for you, along with the doctor." He looked down at their joined hands. "As for me, I haven't left your side except when the doctor or Sarah shooed me out." Bethany felt tears welling in her eyes at his devotion. 3 days. You must be exhausted. I'll sleep when I'm sure you're out of danger." His thumb resumed its gentle stroking of her palm. "Besides, I made a promise to see you safely to your destination. Seems to me you're not quite safe yet." "And where is my destination exactly? This isn't Placerville." Sully's expression turned hesitant. "About that, I need to tell you something." Alarm fluttered in Bethany's chest. "What is it?" "Your uncles claim it's here in Coloma, not Placerville. I showed the deed to Jacob, and he knew of it immediately. It's about 2 miles upstream, one of the better producing claims in the area." He watched her carefully. "I hope you're not disappointed we're not in Placerville." Relief washed through her. "Disappointed? Sully, I couldn't care less which town we're in. The important thing is that we're here together and apparently closer to my uncle's claim than I expected." His smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "Together," he repeated. "I like the sound of that." "So do I." She tugged gently on his hand. "Now come here and kiss me properly. I've been unconscious for 3 days and I've missed you." Sully needed no further encouragement. His lips found hers in a kiss that held both tenderness and promise, speaking of all they'd endured together and the future that now stretched before them. The weeks of Bethany's recovery passed more quickly than she could have imagined, filled with a deepening relationship with Sully and growing friendships with the Millers and other Coloma residents. Sarah Miller proved to be a godsend, a capable, no-nonsense woman with a warm heart who took Bethany under her wing, helping her adapt to life in the mining community. Sully, true to his word, never left her side except to visit her uncle's claim, bringing back reports of its condition and potential. The previous foreman had kept it operating after her uncle's death, and the modest but steady yield confirmed that Benjamin Crawford had indeed found a promising vein before he died. "It needs proper management," Sully told her one evening as they sat on the Miller's front porch, watching the sunset paint the hills gold. "But there's real potential there, Bethany. Your uncle knew what he was doing." "We'll make it work," she said confidently, reaching for his hand. The "we" didn't escape his notice. His green eyes searched her face. "Are you sure that's what you want? A life here with me, working a gold mine in this wilderness?" Bethany considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, I set out from Boston seeking independence and a fresh start. I thought that meant doing everything alone, proving I needed no one." She smiled, squeezing his hand. Then a wagon wheel crushed my leg and a cowboy carried me for 3 days to safety, and I learned that true strength sometimes means letting someone help you. That independence doesn't have to mean isolation. Sully brought her hand to his lips. And is that what you want now? A partner instead of solitude? Not just any partner, she clarified. You, Garrett Sullivan, only you. Something shifted in his expression, a certainty, a decision made. Without releasing her hand, he slid from his chair to one knee before her. I came west seeking fortune, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. I thought gold was what I was looking for, but it was you, Bethany Crawford. From the moment I found you on that mountain, you've been the treasure I never knew I was seeking. He paused, drawing a deep breath. I know it hasn't been long, but when you know, you know. Will you marry me? Joy bubbled up within Bethany, effervescent and overwhelming. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Sully, I will marry you. He rose to kiss her, and in that moment, Bethany knew that the accident that had seemed like the worst disaster of her life had in fact been the greatest blessing, bringing her to this man, this place, this future she could never have imagined. They were married 2 months later in Coloma's small church, with Sarah Miller as Bethany's matron of honor and Jacob as Sully's best man. Bethany wore a simple blue dress that Sarah had helped her make, and leaned on a beautifully carved cane that Sully had commissioned from a local craftsman, a wedding gift that acknowledged her injury while celebrating her recovery. You may always have a slight limp, Doctor. Elliot had told her during her final examination, but you're healing remarkably well. I expect you'll be able to do most everything you did before, given time. True to his prediction, by the time of their wedding, Bethany could walk short distances without assistance, though she still relied on the cane for longer journeys. Sully watched her progress with fierce pride, celebrating each small victory as if it were his own. After the ceremony, the entire town joined in the celebration, holding a feast in the meadow beside the American River where it all began. As the sun set and lanterns were lit, casting golden light over the gathering, Jacob Miller raised a glass in toast. To Bethany and Sully, he called, his voice carrying over the crowd. Two people who prove that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't found in the riverbed but on the trail itself. May your vein of happiness never run dry. Cheers erupted, and Sully pulled Bethany close for a kiss that promised a lifetime of adventures together. Later, as they danced slowly beneath the stars, mindful of her still healing leg, he whispered in her ear, "Are you happy, Mrs. Sullivan?" Bethany looked up at her husband, this extraordinary man who had carried her broken body through mountains, who had never left her side during her darkest hours, who looked at her with such love that it took her breath away. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she answered truthfully. "And you?" Sully's smile was radiant in the lantern light. "I found gold after all," he said simply, drawing her closer. "The most precious kind." In the years that followed, the Sullivan mine prospered under their joint management. Sully's practical knowledge of the land combined with Bethany's sharp business sense proved an unbeatable combination. They built a comfortable home overlooking their claim, close enough to Coloma for convenience, but with enough distance to enjoy the tranquility of the mountains that had brought them together. 2 years after their wedding, Bethany gave birth to their first child, a son they named Benjamin, after her uncle whose legacy had made their life possible. A daughter, Elizabeth, followed 18 months later, named for Sully's sister who had never completed her own journey west. On the 5th anniversary of the day Sully had found Bethany on the mountain trail, they stood together on their porch, watching their children play in the yard as the setting sun gilded the distant peaks. "You ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't come along when you did?" Bethany asked, leaning against her husband's solid strength. Sully's arm tightened around her waist. I try not to. The thought of losing you before I even found you. He shook his head. I prefer to think it was meant to be that somehow. I was always meant to be on that trail at that moment. Bethany smiled, reaching up to touch his face, still as beloved to her as it had been that first day. My hero carrying me to safety. My brave girl fighting to survive, he countered, kissing her palm. From the yard came the sound of their children's laughter, bright and clear in the evening air. Bethany thought of all they had endured and all they had built together, not just a home and a business, but a life rich with love and purpose. We've come a long way from that mountain trail, she mused. Sully smiled, the same slow smile that still made her heart beat faster after all these years. The best journey of my life, he said, and it's nowhere near finished yet. As twilight deepened into night, they called their children in for supper, moving together with the easy synchronicity of two people whose paths had merged completely. The mountain wind still blew, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, but the foundation they had built withstood every storm, stronger for having been forged in adversity. And sometimes, on clear nights when the moon illuminated the peaks where their story began, Bethany would touch the slight unevenness in her gait, the permanent reminder of those 3 desperate days, and feel not regret but gratitude. For what had seemed like the worst moment of her life had led her to the best. A love born of courage and sacrifice, tested by fire, enduring as the mountains themselves.